This podcast is part of the Zeo to Hero podcast network. Hello, all my beautiful people. It's time for another fun episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. And I just want to say thank you to everyone tuning in right here, right now. Whether this be your first time or you've listened many other times, I appreciate each and every one of you here today. So today's guest is going to be a really cool one. He is a guy that I met at ArtCon. He is known for doing Green Arrow comics and Swamp Thing and Clerks, The Lost Scenes, and all kinds of other stuff, even Wonder Woman and Invincible Universe. We're going to talk about all this stuff today in the episode, and we're going to get some advice from him as well. And I am talking about Phil Hester. He is awesome to talk with. He was a great guest, and I know you guys are going to have a great time hearing this episode. And for those of you who are here just to listen to the Phil Hester episode, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you stick around and listen to some of my other episodes as well. So, if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast.
You're bloody welcome!
You know?
Hey, Dad.
If I get my hand stuck in a pickle jar, I'm straight up bull in a china shop, just swinging around.
Started writing songs when I was about 12 or so.
Seriously?
They're retrofitting me now, and
I'm like, yes, finally.
I've also had the opportunity to go train with Hoist Gracie and Dan Severin.
Wow.
I like that. That's different. It stands out.
That day I took my very first bump and it was fun.
There's only one section to go through first.
Yeah.
Toys.
Bro.
I was like, no, man, surely this guy's not worked out that long.
I haven't laughed that hard since I was a little girl.
What?
Man, this guy won't shut up.
And just a reminder before we get started here, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to IYGADAP wherever it is you're listening to. Hit that notification bell so you are notified when a new episode drops. Also, make sure that you go out there and rate and review this episode. Tell me what you think of it. And the more people that do that, the more likely I am to be recommended to somebody else. Now, on to the show. All right, everybody. So today's guest is going to be a lot of fun to talk to, I think. He is a comic book artist and writer. I actually met him at ArtCon. He's worked on projects like Swamp Thing and Clerks, The Lost Scenes, and Green Arrow, Green Hornet, and many other comics. Actually, whenever I had Kevin Mellon on the show, he spoke very, very highly of today's guest. And I am talking about Phil Hester. Man, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. I am excited to be here and excited to talk with you.
Same here.
So, as I brought up at the beginning, we kind of met at ArtCon. Was that your first time being at that con, or a lot of the other ones that I've had on the show said that they've been there multiple times?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've been there at least twice, maybe 3 times.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a fun little show because it's sort of more community based than fandom based. Yep. So you sort of meet more normal people. Not that comics readers aren't normal, but you meet people that like aren't necessarily exposed to comics in their daily life. So you get to explain a little bit more, and it's a little more educational. And there are a lot of kids, so it's a cool show. Yeah,
I liked how there was the interaction with the artists and stuff that were there. You were able, people were like bringing in their own artwork and like getting pointers on that. And I know that, like I said, I've had Kevin on the show, and one thing that he told me is whenever he first met you, you gave him some pointers on where to get started, on what to start with and everything. So is that something that you like to kind of try to do at these cons?
Oh, for sure. Like I love to review portfolios and, give people tips about their art, even if they don't want to pursue like comics per se, if they just want to critique about their art in general. Probably the most valuable thing I got out of getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree was learning how to talk about both my work and other people's work in a constructive way.
Right.
So I think it lets me talk about both people's comics portfolios and just like their art in general in a way that's instructive to them. So when I get to stretch those muscles, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I like it whenever people, like you said, it was more of a community base whenever that one was going on. I love that whenever you're able to help each other out. Nobody's saying, well, you're trying to take my spot or anything like that. It's just help, and I think we need more of that in the community.
Well, I think that applies in general to comics as a scene. I don't think people there's a handful of people that have that sort of unhealthy competitiveness to them.
Yeah.
And they sort of have this that kind of this prickly aura around them. They're even if you're super successful, the price they're paying for that's too high.
Yeah.
So it almost everybody in comics is very welcoming and wants to help each other out. And it's foolish to be competitive about it because the growth for this industry is sort of unlimited. We can go in so many different directions and we can go down so many avenues we haven't gone down yet.
Right.
That it's not like I have to get out of the river for a 20-year-old cartoonist to come floating down.
Right.
There's room for all of us on it. So being open and helpful is sort of the minimum. It's sort of the least you can do as an established professional.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, it should be that way in even other aspects too of life. In general, I wish that there were more people that were like that because I like that kind of community.
Yeah.
So what age did you really decide that this was something that you wanted to pursue?
Well, I always kind of messed around with it when I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of positive reinforcement for drawing when I was very young.
Yeah.
And I always like to make up my own stories. I'm the eldest child of my family, and by quite a few years. So I was a little more off on my own than my brothers and sister.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a little more alone time, and I had to sort of entertain myself because my mom was busy with the babies.
Right.
And so I made up a lot of my own stories. And then as soon as I could read, I was reading mythology and comics and whatever I could get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
So the language of comics seemed very natural to me, to tell stories with pictures.
Right.
And I would say about age 12 or 13, I had a small comic collection. It seemed huge to me at the time, 50 books. And when I was 13, Frank Miller's Daredevil came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this vague notion of I would like to be a cartoonist. I had certain cartoonists that I liked. I could tell a good comic from a bad comic even at a young age. But when I saw Frank's Daredevil, I was like, oh, that's the kind of cartoonist I want to be.
Okay.
Those are the kind of stories I want to tell, stuff that's very high contrast and very storytelling oriented, and not so decorative and illustrative as much as cinematic.
Right.
And that's when I got serious about it. And luckily, when I was in junior high and high school, even though I went to a very small high school, graduating class of 36.
Oh. Metroplex there.
Yeah. I still live in the same town. It's 1,000 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And even though it was a very small school, I had 3 or 4 friends that were also into comics.
Mm-hmm.
For different age groups, some older, some younger.
Right.
But we were all big enough nerds, and we were all talented enough as artists to form this kind of little amateur co-op where we would make our own books.
Yeah.
And we would do comedy books. We'd do parodying our teachers. We'd do horror anthology. We did superheroes. We did all those things, and we were sort of caught up in Stan Lee's Stan's soapbox persona of what we thought the comics industry was like. So we were we acted like we were actual publishers, and that was it's all for fun and everything. But that was actually really good training for the moment I actually broke through to the indie scene in college.
Right.
And I was ready to do it because I'd done I'd written comics, I'd lettered comics, I'd drawn them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd met deadlines and all that stuff. That's all a lot of people don't a lot of people get to their early 20s being really good at art without ever experiencing those other aspects of the job.
Yeah.
And so I felt like that sort of amateur press stuff I was doing in high school and college like gave me a leg up when it was time to like break into the pros, even at the very, very low level that I did.
Yeah. So you brought something up there at the beginning that I kind of wanted to touch on, and you were talking about how it made sense for you to tell stories with pictures. And, I mean, that's one of our earliest ways of telling stories too. So you would think that it's kind of in our DNA to want to tell stories with pictures. I mean, the cave paintings and stuff that you find, those were their way of telling their stories and stuff. And so
certainly. And
comic books, is that just a more expounded on version of that almost.
Oh, certainly. And I think the clearest example of that was when I was in college and I finally got my hands on some foreign comics. Like comic shops just barely had begun. I'm that old. Had just barely begun when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And then when I got into college, they were sort of flourishing. And, I got my hands on some Italian comics and some Mexican comics. And I had friends that traveled around the world and they knew I was into comics. So they would buy the comics from, whatever country they were in and send them to me.
Right.
And I was so sort of enchanted by the idea that I could follow all these stories without being able to read the, read the language that they were in.
Right.
And I was like, that was more proof to me that like it's a very powerful storytelling medium. And the other thing that I find like so compelling about it, film is the same way. It's like, you can communicate visually.
Right.
But in a way that's different from film. Film needs a budget and comics don't. Comics you just need paper and something to draw with. And nowadays you don't even need that. You just need a tablet or something.
Yeah.
And like there's absolutely zero between you and your vision like being put out there in the world. And to me, that's like super magical.
Do you have a preference? Do you still prefer like drawing on paper and stuff? Because I know some people, they prefer using the tablet. And then there's others that straight up paper, they prefer that.
Like I said, I'm old. So I like to be all on paper. I have nothing against the other methods. I think they're awesome.
Right.
But I'm also, people that know me know that I'm also an original art collector. I collect other cartoonists' work.
Okay.
And the idea of ever like giving up, having a piece of art at the end of the process is like very weird to me. And I can't get over that. I can't get over that hump.
Right.
Like I have to have a tangible object when I'm done. I blame art collecting and art school for that,
Well, there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm kind of the same way. I have my comic book collections, but I also, it's the comicsology, for some things and as well. But when it comes to DVDs and movies and things like that, my wife always is like, why do you keep those? We have Netflix and we have, these streaming services. But I'm like, no, I like having a physical copy of these things. I'm the same way. It's something about it, it feels more like it's mine. I actually have it. So, and
you can give it to somebody else, when you're done with it.
Right.
It can never get disappeared.
The
way digital media can.
Right. There was another thing that you brought up a minute ago, and you were talking about your collection, how you had 50 comic books. And now you've told me that, you collect all these things. There was something that I read online, and I wanted you to kind of explain it to my listeners what this was. It's called the Hester Paradox. What is that?
Well, it's when your art collection is so big, you can't afford to not insure it.
Right.
But it's also so big, you can't afford to insure it. So like I got the way I've gotten around that is I've bumped my homeowner's policy to as sort of high as I can get it without committing fraud.
Yeah.
I went to get a quote on appraising I talked to my insurance agent. I was like, this collection's worth quite a bit. And she's like, well, it'd have to be appraised. Who in the area can appraise this? And I said, probably me,
Yeah.
And she's like, well, we can't do that. So I contacted some auction houses to get quotes on appraising my collection for insurance purposes. And it's like almost 10% of the collection's value.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So if it gets much bigger, I'm going to have to take the plunge and do that.
Right.
But right now I'm just sort of skating on my homeowners, making sure all my wiring is up to date.
Yeah.
Not allowing smokers in the house, and I should be good.
So, I mean, would you need like I don't know if you'd be like a humidor almost, but do you need like a controlled room? Would you think?
You should. You really should control humidity in your house.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of paper.
Right.
And I live in a fairly northern. It does get very humid here in the summertime.
Right.
But it's if you have air conditioning, it's easy to stay on top of it and keep everything at a low humidity.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I've got some pieces that are, over 120 years old.
Oh wow. Okay.
And some others that are around 100 years old that I just, you got to treat them very carefully.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think that would be a little harder where I'm at. Humidity here gets extremely bad. In fact, I just got back from a con in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and that's like really close to the Mississippi, and it's even more humid there. I mean, every time that I went from like my car or in a building to outside, immediately my glasses would fog up, And it would be insane trying to control it even down here, I think.
Yeah, I have a friend who is going to move to India.
Oh, okay.
And he has a big art collection. And he's like, I think I'm going to have to get rid of it. I think I'm going to have to sell it before I go because it's just, it's impossible to defeat the humidity over there. Right. And paper doesn't do well. And it's kind of scary.
Yeah, that would almost, to me, that'd be heartbreaking to have to do that.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do because, ironically, I had a meeting today with my lawyer about my will and about how I would dispose of my art collection eventually. And we went over a lot of the scenarios, and I learned a lot about the right way to do it. But just actually sitting with that and thinking about it got me depressed.
I can understand that.
Like, I don't want to let these go.
So we're going to kind of switch this over just a little bit here. And I kind of want to talk about your process because I know that you write too. What is your process when it comes to writing these stories?
Well, I see, because I'm also an artist, I see those things as sort of inseparable tasks.
Okay.
So when I'm writing, I'm really visualizing everything I'm writing as an artist. I can't help it. I'm breaking it down in as thumbnails as I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I've tried to articulate this to people in the past, and it's very hard for me to do. I write, what I write looks a lot like dialogue from a radio play.
Okay.
Because I can see the comic playing out in my head, and I'm writing that sort of soundtrack to accompany it on the script.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go back and I will actually thumbnail on the script, like on that dialogue script that I've written, and break things down and change them. But I won't have a panel by panel breakdown written down until I've actually thumbnailed it on the actual script. So it's a very visual thing. I don't know how many like artists or writer artists work this way, but I both things are originating at the same time.
Okay.
But the one I have to write down is dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing the rest of it going on in my head.
Yeah.
And then from there, I kind of jump back and forth. I'll thumbnail, then I'll script, then I'll thumbnail, and I'll script until I feel like it's the rhythms are in the right place and the page counts are right. And then I will type it all up like a good little comic book scripter And then I will also sort of abandon my thumbnails at that point. Like,
oh, really?
If I'm gonna draw it,
Uh-huh.
I will work from those thumbnails.
Uh-huh.
And if the artist that's assigned to draw it wants my thumbnails, I will give them to them.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll write it like a traditional script and sort of let them take it where they want to. Because, like I said, I've done both sides of this job, and I don't want to overstep
Right.
Into their territory. So if they have a vision they want to bring, once they read my script and they've got an idea of the way they want to do it, I don't want to sort of impinge on that.
Right. So I don't want to like cause anything here, and if I am, I'm that's not what I'm meaning to do.
I'll storm
but
off.
Have you ever had one to where you've had a certain idea, and so you've taken your thumbnails away, given it to an artist, and by the end you're like, that's not exactly what I was wanting?
Oh, almost always.
Really?
It's
okay.
Almost always different. And
okay.
It's almost always a pleasant surprise.
Okay.
Like, it's very rarely disappointing.
Okay.
There's sometimes certain, like, from reading comics that certain artists are great storytellers and certain artists aren't.
Right.
And the only time I will step in and say we've got to change something is if a storytelling moment isn't clear, like a crucial storytelling moment. If I can fix it with dialogue, I'll fix it with dialogue.
Yeah.
But if it's like, if I say, you know what, we never see this character pick up the gun that they're using on the next page, and we need to see that.
Yeah.
I will, maybe step in and ask for something to be redrawn. Yeah. But I would say that's happened in less than 1% of the projects I've done.
Okay. Okay. So there was a word that came, I was talking with, I believe it was the cartoon. He's out of Baja, California. And he brought up a certain word, and I've heard it because I actually work with a comic book company out of Central Arkansas. And what they were saying was camera angles.
Yeah.
And, I had never really thought about it like that until I started hearing them and him talk about it. It's camera angles, and it's a movie, but on a piece of paper almost, and having those specific camera angles, like you said, we never saw him pick up the gun. Well, that's something that you're going to want to show in there. And it's so cool to be able to think about it like from that perspective now that I that word has been placed in my head.
Yeah, I think the closest skill set to writing comics is writing screenplays.
Okay.
Because you have to think visually. You have to think about what the audience is seeing.
Yeah.
In a novel, it can be all emotion or all internal monologue.
Right.
But in a film or a comic, it has to be what the reader is seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
the reason I think comics are so valuable is that it's a film that the reader controls the pace of.
Yes.
They can go slow, they can speed up. I mean, you can push them here and there, but by and large, they're controlling the pace at which they consume the content, which is vast, which is what I think makes comics special. You get that sort of, you can get the spectacle of film.
Yeah.
But you can also get that sort of same intimate relationship people have with reading reading prose.
Right.
When you're reading prose, it's like a very personal situation. You're imagining almost all of it. You're controlling the pace. And when you're in a film, you're sort of in a thrill ride.
Right.
And comics is sort of the best of both of those worlds, in my opinion.
I think I agree with you there because, there's been times where, I've watched a movie and people are like, oh, well, this part happened. And I was like, I don't really remember that happening. And it was because I'm going at the pace of what the director put it at, and then, reading a comic book, like you said, it's, I can take time to study each page. I read the dialogue and then look at what's going on there, and it makes it, like you said, it's at your own pace.
And it's also why comics bear repeated reading more than I think other mediums do. Like I've reread the Len Wein, Bernie Wrights, and Swamp Thing stories like dozens of times.
Yeah.
Because like every time I read it, I see something different in Bernie's art, or I appreciate something new in the way Len Wein wrote it.
Yeah.
Or the way Titania Wood colored it. I will see something new every time. And that's because like the first time I read it when I was like 11, I was so enthralled by it that I just tore through it, you know? And then each time I come back to it, I read it, I see it with a critical eye, and it holds up. There's something new and exciting each time.
Yeah.
So I do think that's what's special about comics.
Yeah. I'm, the same way right now. I'm actually rereading Injustice. And, such a great story. I almost feel like I'm reading it again for the first time, going back, because like you said, there are things that I missed in there the first time that I'm able to appreciate now. And that comic books, it's funny. So my dad is the one who got me into comics, and he's a pastor. And so it's not really somebody that you would really expect to get you into comics.
I think you would be surprised.
Really?
I honestly think you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So he's the one who initially got me into comics, and there's so many of them that, he pretty much gave me his collection, when I was a teenager. And so I've been able to go back and even reread some of these stories from even, whenever he was, a teenager. And so it's really cool to, like you said, when it comes to collections, even you're able to pass that down to somebody else. Give them a chance to look at it too and appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, I don't want to get too sappy, but it's like, it hits all the right notes for me in terms of like, it's a vital art form.
Yeah.
But it's also this sort of cultural artifact that is like almost a bygone era.
Yeah.
But it's also still thriving and still like adding to the lore. So it's like, to me, it's like just the most exciting thing to be a part of.
Right. Yeah. I definitely get that. So there's a few different comics that I wanted to talk about with you that you've been a part of. And one of them is the Invincible Universe. We have the show that is going on right now. How did you get into this project?
Well, I've known Robert like for a long time, like before he was Robert, when he was doing like Battle Pope and stuff like that when he was a younger guy. And a lot of people, I think most people don't remember that, like when Invincible launched, it was part of a new sort of mini superhero universe at Image.
Right.
Invincible launched, Noble Causes, Venture, and Fire Breather all launched at the same time. And so we were sort of like sister books to Invincible.
Okay.
And Robert's a fan of Fire Breather, and he saw, I can't remember what book. I'm not going to mention the book I was writing, but I was writing a book that he like thought was beneath me.
Okay.
And he was like, what are you doing wasting your time over there? You could be over here writing Guarding the Globe, because that's what it was called then.
Yeah.
And for the people that don't know, it's about the secondary characters in Invincible.
Right.
Like what they're doing when they're not on panel in Invincible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're most of them are in a super group called Guardians of the Globe. And I was working on that book with Todd Knock and having a great time. And I gave an interview where I tried to explain what the book was to an interviewer. And I said, yeah, it's sort of what else is happening in the Invincible Universe. I was like, damn, why don't we just call it Invincible Universe?
Yeah.
And Robert said, yeah, you're right. We should have called it Invincible. So we retitled it Invincible Universe, and we wrote it for many years. And Todd drew the hell out of it. And we had a great time. Like, it was such a blast.
Yeah.
Because Robert was like, as long as you don't like mess with what's going on in Invincible, you can do whatever you want. And we did. We had a lot of fun. And the only reason it came to an end is because Invincible came to an end.
Right.
Robert had plans for a lot of the main players in Invincible Universe.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil anything for people, but they wind up being like a major players in sort of the quote unquote end times of Invincible.
Yeah.
So we had to wrap our book up and let those characters go back into Invincible.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun, and it sold well, not like crazy well, until the cartoon came out. And now like people are buying the trade like crazy, which is which is exciting to me. And like I get people bringing it up to me at shows to be signed now, even though we did it like quite a few years ago.
That's cool. Well, and one thing for people who haven't read that, or they haven't read Invincible, you kind of need to have read Invincible almost first, because there's a lot that gets spoiled in Invincible Universe from the actual show.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but I know a lot of people like got so excited by the show, they just jumped right into those. Robert does an excellent job of putting out those compendiums.
Yeah.
And so like, I know people have just been like tearing through Invincible since the show came out.
Right.
And then they get to the end of Invincible and go, what else is there? And they see there's Invincible Universe. So they go back and check that out.
Right.
But yeah, it was a rewarding gig, and it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. I love I've watched it. I've read it. You know, I'm currently reading Invincible, and then I've got Invincible Universe that I've read a little bit of it. And then one of my friends told me, there's like, you might want to finish Invincible first. And so I really appreciated him telling me that, you know, but I love all of it. The way that it looks, you know, I mean, the story in it is, it was funny how it came, like, let's go with the TV show for a moment here. It's funny how it came out right around the same time on Amazon Prime when it came to another superhero show that was going on, The Boys. You know, they kind of came out very close to each other, and so I mean, it kind of kept me excited about superheroes again for a while. You know, so
yeah, they're both like different. You know, they're both kind of like different, fresh takes on it.
Yeah,
and it's funny because like I said, Fire Breather and Invincible came out at the same time,
right?
And we were both sort of like, we're sort of just doing Spider-Man again, both of us, you know? But we're doing it with our own sensibility. Like we're not like, you know, how like Spider-Man's sort of frozen in time. And we were like, well, we want to do these stories about what it's like to be a teenage superhero now.
Yeah.
And Robert was closer to that, like age-wise, than I was, but I had kids that were approaching that age.
Okay.
So we were sort of seeing it from both of these perspectives, but I think it's proof that like, the genre itself is like, so like infinitely malleable, you know, you can, as long as you have a unique voice and a unique point of view, you can bring it to the genre and sort of bend it to sort of fit the story you want to tell. Because like, you know, like Garth Ennis talks about hating superheroes, but like he loves Superman.
Yeah.
You know, he loves like, I think what he hates is all the bunk that sort of accretes to all those things. But like noble characters are still really important to him.
Right.
And taking the wind out of like hypocritically noble characters is that's sort of what The Boys is all about.
Right. Yeah.
That's important. That's an important like POV to take too. And that's what's valuable about that book and show. Yeah.
So for me, I'm really big. I love psychology when it comes to the why behind stories. I'm a wrestling fan too, and I love seeing the why behind the different things that they do in the ring. Same with comics, same with TV shows. And that's why when it comes to, say you do have a villain or the heroes in The Boys, you know, I love how they give you a reason why they are the way they are, you know, and it's just not like, I was talking to Ryan Andes last night on the show, and he was talking about, you know, it's not just the, you know, twisting his mustache, got somebody on the tracks type of villain. I like a villain that has story behind it, that can give you, it's like, well, okay, I kind of understand where they're coming from. I like those kind of villains.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the requirement now. Readers are so sophisticated now that you can't get away with those sort of cardboard cutout caricatures anymore.
Right.
They expect, and part of it has to do with the fact that these characters are around so long that to make them interesting, you have to give them backstories. Like Lex Luthor is interesting. The Joker is interesting.
Yeah.
Because they've been around so long, they've had these backstories built up behind them.
Right.
And they're rewarding to learn about and read about. Dr. Doom's interesting, and that's required now. Readers are hip to the old, they're hip to the old ways, and now they want to see, a modern story.
Right. Yeah. I can believe that. So I kind of want your opinion on this and everything. I've talked to one of my friends about this. We've got Dr. Doom coming back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with Robert Downey Jr. I'm wondering how overpowered they're going to have this version of Dr. Doom, because I was very excited whenever they were going to have the Fantastic Four movie come out and they had Dr. Doom on there, that he wasn't, much more powerful than the Fantastic Four were. But I feel like in this way, they have an opportunity to kind of make this the Dr. Doom that, we've seen in the comics.
Yeah. I mean, his superpower is his brain.
Right.
But and his kryptonite's his ego.
Yeah.
But when you look at the comics, he's already he's got to be a very capable, powerful character, because he takes on the Fantastic Four by himself.
Right. Yeah.
And so I don't think they would. I don't think you can make him overpowered in the cinematic universe when he's already pretty formidable in the Marvel Comics universe as well.
Right. Yeah. I was just I wonder how close that they're going to have him to that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like you said, he took on the Fantastic Four. I think, didn't he kill the Thing with his own arm in one of the comics?
Dude,
I think.
Listen, so so much happens in from wrestling.
Yeah,
characters die and they come back. They do a heel turn, then a face turn, then a heel turn, then a face turn.
Yeah,
it's the same thing in comics.
Yeah.
Every character has died.
Right.
Every character has come back. Every character's been a bad guy or a good guy. Yeah. So I think it's the thing I keep saying, but the only true thing in comics continuity is sort of quality. Quality becomes canon. So that's why stuff like The Dark Knight or Year One has become canon, because they're so good.
Right.
And the same way with the Killing Joke. The Killing Joke wasn't meant to be canon, but it was so compelling to people that it became canon. And you can see that it's happening in Daredevil. Born Again is going to become part of the television film lore too, because it's such a compelling story. So all the minutia, like you say, didn't he beat the Thing to death with his own arm? Maybe, you don't know.
Yeah.
It could have happened. Sure. But the stories I really remember are the classic, Lee and Kirby Fantastic Four stories. Right. And then a few here and there that also rose to that level. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any hobbies? What do you like to do when you're not, doing comics?
It's pathetic because it's also comics. But I'd say outside of comics itself, I do like to read normal books. I do like classic films. I'm a big time fantasy football player. Although I'm in a league with other comics guys. So I can't escape the comics, but it's all pros. We're in a pro comics league.
Yeah. Right.
So I would say I'm just now getting back into fantasy football mode right now. I'm gearing.
Yeah. Well, we just started.
Yeah. We have our draft next weekend, so I'm starting to gear. I won the league last year, so
nice.
It's tough to draft from that last spot, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a favorite team?
Yeah, I grew up I'm from Iowa, and we don't have a pro team.
Right.
It's sort of evenly divided between Vikings, Packers, Bears, and Chiefs fan here, and a few Bronco fans.
Yeah.
So, but I grew up in general an AFC fan. I like AFC teams, and I think it's because when I was a kid, they were sort of like the younger, brighter teams. So yeah, I tend to like AFC teams.
Okay.
I would say right now my favorite team is probably the Chiefs. I'm not just a front runner. I liked them when they were not the juggernaut that they are today.
Oh, me too. I remember as a kid getting made fun of for being a Chiefs fan. I was born in Kansas City, so naturally I'm a Chiefs fan. But yeah, I remember getting made fun of wearing a Chiefs shirt to school, and they're like, "Oh, they suck," things like that.
Well, when I was a kid, when I was like 10, I lived in Boston, but the Patriots were like dreadful then, and at that time, like the Red Sox were red hot. And the Bruins were a big deal, and the Celtics were all good. So, like, football was an afterthought then. It was definitely like baseball, hockey, basketball. That's all anybody cared about. And so, like, I didn't really develop. Like, I'm still a Red Sox fan because I was 10 then, but I did not develop a football fandom.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when it comes to baseball, I'm a Cardinals guy. My grandpa used to set me down and have me watch Cardinals games with him all the time. So, yeah.
No, I just listen. I know as a Red Sox fan, I know this. Like, I know my fan base is insufferable, and you have to know that too.
I do. Yeah. Oh yeah, but I mean. I can't help it. It's my team, man.
It's a team you were born into.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we don't pick these things. Correct. They just were. It just happens. So, you actually do a lot of different conventions and things like that.
Oh yeah, I just got back from maybe the smallest convention I will ever do.
Really?
It was in a little town called Pocahontas, Iowa.
Okay.
Population 2,700.
Okay.
I think, and they actually had a convention.
Wow!
And it was in like the community expo hall, you know.
Yeah.
And but it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. I like those little ones. Kind of like we were talking about with ArtCon. It's a little one too.
Yeah. And also the thing is, I think about like when I was a kid. Like if I had the chance to meet like an actual cartoonist when I was like 10 or 12, it would have been like the most important thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
So I try to support little cons when they're starting out.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll grow up into huge cons. Like, I remember like 10 years ago going to SuperCon in Sioux Falls, and it was like 600 people came. And now this year they'll probably have 15,000.
Oh, wow.
And I love watching that sort of thing happen. And I love being able to pitch in at the beginning and like in some small way anyway, try to help that convention grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a favorite interaction that you remember over the different ones that you've been to?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you like not to get heavy on it, but like what probably the most important one to me was like, I used to really be in the habit of being embarrassed by my earlier work.
Okay.
And I still am, I guess. But I would like be very derisive and vocal about it and sort of like run down my own work in front of fans, which I learned through this one incident that you should like not do.
Okay.
And a woman came up to me and had me sign a bunch of books, and I was about to sort of like, diss them a little bit as I was signing them, like, oh gosh, I wish I were better when I did it, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how these were her husband's comics, and he had passed away, and she had kept reading him because it was his thing, and she kept getting his pull list because she couldn't let that go.
Right.
And how like a certain storyline I did in that book helped her like process his death.
Oh, wow.
And it was like super emotional, you know, and it taught me a lesson. Like if I had been my usual, like glib self, I would have like crapped all over this book in front of her. And it was like a really important thing to her.
Right. Yeah.
And so like, even if you do have a feeling about your past work that's not important to you or that you're embarrassed by it, if someone's bringing it to you, it meant something to them.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you deride it, you're deriding their experience, and you're sort of invalidating it. And that's like a bad habit that I spent too much of my career doing. And I'm glad I'm like past that now. But yeah, that's the interaction that has like meant the most to me.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, you never know. I mean, what kind of impact you're going to have on somebody. I mean, I'm the same way with my stuff, with this show. In fact, I think your episode is episode 122. And
wow.
I mean, I go back, and some of the first ones, I was like, man, I really don't like those episodes, but I've had a couple people tell me, don't be down on yourself, because it could mean something to somebody else. But I'm the same way. I actually have told people, don't go listen to my first, couple of episodes, because they were terrible. But, I mean, maybe somebody will find something in those that.
Yeah, you don't know. That's like you haven't, once something is out in the world, you don't have any, like, your ownership of it has ended.
Right.
And like, people get to use it however it makes sense to them to use it. And like, it's not your place to sort of disqualify their enjoyment of it.
Yeah. What was your favorite comic growing up?
It's tough for me to say, because like when I'm honest with myself and I jump back and think about it, I love Marvel Team Up.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because I love Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I love seeing new characters too that I didn't necessarily know about yet.
Right.
So Marvel Team Up was a big one for me. Those, we already talked about it, but those Ween and Wrights and Swamp Things.
Yeah.
They were coming out in reprints when I was a kid, like those DC dollar size book reprints of Swamp Thing.
Uh-huh.
And also a weird little book called E-Man, which came out from Charlton Comics. Only lasted like 10 issues.
E-Man.
E-Man.
Okay.
It was by Nick Cudi and Joe Staten. It was Joe Staten's first like big work.
Okay.
And like, there was something about it that had like such a joyfulness to it that it was like the polar opposite of Swamp Thing. Like, Swamp Thing was dark and heavy.
Yeah.
And E-Man was very bright and lively, almost like a Warner Brothers cartoon. And so I had those sort of twin poles operating. And then of course all the classics that everybody was into, like Batman and Fantastic Four and stuff like that.
Right.
I love all that too.
Oh yeah.
But I would say Marvel Team Up, Swamp Thing, and E-Man were my big formative books. And then when I became like a teen, Daredevil took over.
Yeah.
Frank Miller's Daredevil specifically.
So how big of a geek out moment did you have whenever you realized that you were going to be working on Swamp Thing then?
It was huge. It was, let me preface this by saying I don't think I was ready for the assignment.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't care.
Yeah.
So let's say you got called up by the Cardinals.
Yeah.
You're saying, hey, you're going to go into center field. You're going to start in center field. And you're like, I might be the worst center fielder the Cardinals have ever had.
Yeah.
But guess what? I was center fielder for the Cardinals.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's sort of the feeling I had on Swamp Thing. I was like, maybe I'm not ready for this, but I love this book and this character so much that I don't care. I want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And
I jumped in with both feet and I gave it my all.
Yeah.
And it was fun to work with Mark Miller. It was fun to work with Kim DeMulder, Stuart Moore, my editor, and I got colored by Titania Wood, who had been coloring the book since Bernie Wrightson was drawing it.
Yeah.
That was like super exciting to me. So like, I will reserve, taking my own lesson here, I will reserve my judgment about how good of a job I did.
Yeah.
But I will just say that it was like the thrill of a lifetime to get to do it. Because I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
And it was like my first like regular assignment. I'd had other gigs before at Marvel and DC and at First and other smaller publishers, but it was my first like monthly job. And I felt like I had made it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was reading up on you and I found a few things. you actually minored in sculpting and painting. Do you ever do anything with that anymore?
Not so much in comics. I mean, when I first started out, there was the landscape of comics has changed a lot. There used to be like when I came up in the late 80s, early 90s, it was sort of the heyday of the comics anthology.
Yeah.
There were tons of anthologies, and they had like such a broad purview that you could do really experimental stuff in them. And so I did a lot of like mixed media collage, a lot of like sculptures that I photographed and integrated into my artwork. It's harder to do that with superhero stuff. Like superhero stuff demands a sort of consistent visual vocabulary that you can't get away with collage and things.
Yeah.
But I used a lot of that when I did my sort of kind of artsy short stories during the earlier part of my career. I used that stuff a lot.
Yeah.
And technically my sculpture minor is really a performance art minor.
Okay.
But they didn't have that.
Oh.
Like it wasn't an official minor.
Okay.
But it was part of the sculpture school.
Yeah.
So it was although I did do a lot of sculpture, it was mostly performance art and environments that I was doing.
Yeah.
That got me that minor.
Yeah. Do you prefer doing the whole story yourself, or do you like doing the penciling for other people's stories? Or
I would love to find the right things that I would do everything on.
Yeah.
But I try to be objective about like my skill set,
right,
and what I'm right to draw and what I'm not right to draw.
Yeah.
And so when I come up with an idea, I'll sit back and look at it and go, can I get away with drawing this? Should I be the person to draw this?
Right.
But I know I know so many talented cartoonists.
Yeah.
That I'm like, yeah, but this artist will look so much better on this than I would. That I try to cast myself objectively, like as if I were an actor.
Yeah.
Like just because I'm directing a movie doesn't mean I should cast myself in it. And I try to be that way about my art as well. So there are a few things that I'm the right person to draw, and there's a lot of things that I'm not.
Yeah.
So I think and also like the older I get, the slower I get.
Okay.
Like it should be the opposite. Like I should be getting better so I can go faster. But instead what happens is I get better enough to notice what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
And so I slow down and try to nail all that stuff down. And it makes it sort of like when I was in my 20s, I could draw 2 books a month easily and write another one. And now drawing 1 book a month is like, max output for me.
Well, I mean, you're still producing quality stuff though. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having to
they'll have to drag me out.
So I actually have a problem whenever I'm drawing stuff that I get too engrossed in the details, and I get to the point where I'm like, at the end, I'm like, okay, I feel like I've messed this up now.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that happen with some of your drawings?
I have. It happens at every drawing.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily the details. It might be some aspect of the drawing that I feel like I've lost control of.
Okay. Yeah.
And I tell you, the best thing about art school was having a professor that talked me through that process and said, like, you're not really going to get to anything worthwhile in a drawing or a painting or a sculpture unless you lose control of it at some point.
Okay.
And have to fight to get it back. Because that fight, that struggle to understand that drawing, what you're trying to do with that drawing, that's the place where like your personality comes through. That's a place where your problem solving comes through.
Yeah.
That's the place where like the audience finds a way to identify with you. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes you see an artist that's like so perfect, like you sort of bounce off of them.
Yeah.
Like, you look at their drawing and it's just like, there's no purchase for me here.
Right.
Like I'm going to, it's like the surface of a mirror. I'm going to slide off here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, not to get I mean, not to torture this analogy to death, but I think that's why, like, a lot of times kids get into artists that have sort of an amateurish bent to their stuff.
Yeah.
Or like an obsessive or idiosyncratic quality to their work, because they recognize their own tendencies there.
Right.
And that gives them something to latch onto.
Yeah.
Like when you're, if you're like 13 and you see a Steve Rude drawing, it's like it got there by magic. You don't know how that got there. But if you're 13 and you see like a Todd McFarlane drawing, you're like, oh, I do that kind of squiggly stuff.
Right.
I had all those lines,
and
it gives them something to latch onto.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to like your own, like when I talk about losing a drawing, like I said, that's where you apply what's specific to you into the drawing when you get it back.
Yeah.
And it's also like, to tie it back to the beginning of the interview. That's why I can't ever give up on paper.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be able to undo things. I want to have to fight.
Right.
Yeah. And because that struggle is sort of like the only interesting thing about my art. So like, I want people to be a participant with me in that struggle.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll find it as rewarding as I do.
Yeah. So I've just got a couple more questions for you on here, and then we'll get you off of here. Do you have any goals set for this next little bit? Yeah.
It's funny you brought up that last topic, because like one of my goals is to write and draw something next year. And to do a lot more writing next year. I've been stuck drawing for like, my career sort of goes in like these cycles where sometimes I'm writing more, sometimes I'm drawing more. And like the last 5 or 6 years I've been drawing a lot, because like the caliber of writers that have been asking me to work with them are like too good to say no to. So like, I'm going to say no to Jeff Lemire. Am I going to say no to Brian Bendis? Am I going to,
right?
Say no to Tom King? No, I'm going to, if they want to work with me, I'm going to do it. So, I want to like sort of back out and do a lot more of my own writing this year.
Okay. Well, that'd be cool to see. So yeah, definitely. So for somebody who maybe is just wanting to start out, what is a piece of advice that you would give them, or what's a piece of advice that somebody gave you when you first started?
Like I said, I grew up in a very isolated small town, and like I don't think I met another professional until I was a professional.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was tough for me to get really good advice. But I would think the number one thing I would tell somebody is like, if you want to be a cartoonist, start making comics now.
Yeah.
Like make a comic, because even if like a year from now you look back on what you did and you think this is worthless, like this comic's terrible, the learning you do between page 1 and 100 is the sharpest incline in your skills you will ever experience. You will learn so much in that 100 pages. And so just begin. Don't wait for anyone's permission to be like to call yourself a comic book artist or a writer or a musician or a dancer or whatever.
Right.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And go ahead and fail. But that first year is going to teach you so much. And I would say specifically for artists, you have to keep a sketchbook.
Yeah.
And for every page in that sketchbook that is something you wanted to draw, like a dragon or, a barbarian or whatever, a superhero, a fun thing. The next page has to be something you never thought of drawing, like something very mundane.
Okay.
So like, page 1 is Red Sonja. Page 2 is a table lamp.
Okay.
Page 3 is a spaceship. Page 4 is a blender. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Draw things that are rooted in reality,
Mm-hmm.
because that will just, it's like eating your vegetables. It's like doing leg day in the gym.
Yeah.
It's going to increase your overall health as an artist. And I can tell you this from experience, because the very first job I ever had, drawing comics, I had to draw like a baby.
Okay.
and like what 19-year-olds ever drawn a baby? Like I'd only ever, I'd only ever drawn like killer apes,
Yeah.
And on the very next page, I had to draw a train, and I had been fudging it and faking it my whole life up to that point. I was like, oh yeah, now that I'm getting paid for this, I've got to draw these things for real.
Right.
And I would have been better served to have at least like a stronger drawing vocabulary by the time I was a professional. Yeah. And that's why I would say fill up that sketchbook with things you want to do and things you don't want to do.
Yeah. So you bring that up, and it reminds me of, back when I was taking art classes and stuff in high school, and they had us do still lifes, a lot of times, draw the bowl of fruit, things like that. And that helps with the things like you said, like the lamp or the blender or things that you would never expect to draw in a comic,
and it seems like death when you're asked to do it, like in high school, because you only want to do something fun.
So boring. Yeah.
But it's like learning your times tables. You've got to learn that before you can go on to the fun stuff.
Yeah. So do you have anything coming up that maybe you want to bring up before I get you off of here?
Yeah, I just had the project I'm working on right now is not announced yet. So I don't think I can announce it here.
All right.
But I just did a story with Steph Phillips for Oni's new EC revival.
Oh, okay.
Called Family Values, and it's in their first revival book called Echoes from the Abyss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really fun short story that it's not fun, it's disturbing as hell, but it's it's in the EC tradition.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think I've still got a few more Green Arrow covers coming out before I'm done with those.
All right.
And then my new, I guess I can say it's from Dark Horse, but that's probably about it. So I'll have a new series out from Dark Horse next year.
Oh, sweet.
And then some stuff hopefully that I'm writing as well.
Awesome. And if people want to follow you, how can they do that?
I'm on both Twitter and Blue Sky, and just look for Phil Hester in both places.
Okay. Awesome. Well, man.
And I should say I have a Facebook page too that I don't run.
Yeah.
That someone runs for me because I want to stay sane. I stay off Facebook. So, but if you want to, there's some news on that site. There's art on that site.
Yeah.
And if you want to reach me, messages will get to me from Facebook.
Okay. All right, man. Well, it has been awesome talking to you tonight. I've really enjoyed this. I've been looking forward to doing this. So I'm going to talk to you just a few more minutes after we end this recording, but we're going to go ahead and say bye here for now. And again, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you.
Hey there, podcast listener. You enjoying what you're listening to? Well, then do I got a special treat for you. Story time with Cosplay Dude 637. That's me. I'm your host. And I like to tell you stories. Stories that I personally enjoy. So, buckle up, get comfortable, because we're going on a wild ride.
Hey, avid podcast listener, come on over to the Zero to Hero podcast to listen to Billy and Jimmy, myself, talk about all kinds of things from the Nerdverse, Power Rangers, Gundams, anime, random TV shows, diseases, economic turmoil, and how to scam people on crypto.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode with Phil Hester. He was a blast to talk to, and I really do look forward to trying to get him back on the show again to talk about some more of his projects and pick his brain a little more when it comes to art and things like that, because, I really enjoyed that. So next week's episode is going to be another comic book-based episode. I have the co-writers for The First Place Losers, a new comic that is going to be coming out. It's an independent comic. I recently found these guys. Actually, they kind of found me through some other people, and I'm really excited to let you guys hear this episode that I recorded with Andrew and Flobo, the co-writers for this comic book. They had some really cool insights into their story. I've actually got to read the first issue of the comic, and it's a really cool story, and we'll talk about it more But if you could, go out there and look up First Place Losers. It's a really interesting one, and I think you guys are going to enjoy that comic. So make sure that you tune back in next week to hear that episode with Andrew Maxwell and Flobo Boyce. They were both amazing people to have on the show, and so I think you guys are in for a real treat hearing that one. But while you're waiting, make sure that you check out my podcast networks that I am a part of, the OIW Podcast Network and the Zio to Hero Podcast Network. Whether you're looking for wrestling shows or comic shows or just goofy shows in general or just entertainment of some kind, check out both of these networks. They have some really awesome shows that you can listen to while you're waiting on a new one of IYGADAP to drop. Also, make sure that you go out there and check out my merch website. It is up. It is on the show notes here. It is on my link tree. Go out there, get you a t-shirt, get you a hoodie. We're going to have some stickers coming up on there here soon. All different kinds of stuff. But make sure that you go out there and get that. I'll have my Dad Bod t-shirts out on there. I will have just regular IYGADAP shirts. And then I'll have the hoodies and some other really cool stuff coming as well here really soon. So make sure that you go out there. That way you can support this show. And you're also supporting my wife's side business because she is the one who makes all this stuff for me. And that is Stickers by Stacia. If you ever see us at a show, like a convention or something like that, and you see a bunch of stickers on my table, my wife makes those. She does an amazing job. And she does an amazing job making this merch for me as well. And I really appreciate her doing that. So make sure that you check her out too. She has her own Etsy page, and I will have that in the show notes too. At the end of every episode, you hear a song by D-Cure. That is the song that you hear at the end, where he's talking about If You Give a Dad a Podcast, After I Tell You I Love You and Bye. If you like the way that song sounds, make sure that you go out there and follow him. He makes all kinds of great music, and he's a really funny guy. He's got some really cool TikTok stuff that he does, and then his music also. It's always on point, and it's just wonderful stuff. So make sure that you go and check him out as well. So, I always tell you about things that are coming up when it comes to Original Geek and when things that are coming up with myself. The next show that Original Geek will be at is in Hot Springs, Arkansas at SpaCon. That will be September 21st and 22nd that they will be at SpaCon. So make sure that you go out there and you see them. Get you some of these comic books that I've been talking about. Get you an autograph. And they have some really cool just artwork that you can buy as well. And go talk to them. Talk about their stories. They would love to talk to you. They'd love to see you. And then Nick and I will be going. Nick being the owner of Original Geek. You've heard him on the show. He's been on the show more than anybody, I think. I think he's been on here. He says a total of 5 times, and that's counting a one little short snippet that me and him did in one episode. So I'll give it to him. Nick's been on here 5 times. But me and him are going to be going to McAlester, Oklahoma for October 5th and 6th for Hallows Con. There's going to be a wrestling show there. There's going to be all kinds of cool people there. I believe I'm going to get to meet the lady who played Rita Repulsa. Jake Hager's going to be there. Creek Wilson's even going to be there. I've had him here on the show. And so, yeah, this is going to be a really cool one, a cool event to go to. But if you want some of those comics, you can go there as well. And I will be set up there, and Nick will be there with me selling some of the Original Geek comics. And you can get some of my merch, some of those stickers that I was talking about. You can come by and say hi. Come by and tell me a dad joke. I'm thinking about doing like a compilation video. Some of you may know I do Dad Joke of the Week on this show, but I also do a video version of it that I put out on social media like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and places like that. So if you have a dad joke you'd like to tell me, make sure you stop by my booth and tell it to me. We'll try to get you on video there as well. If you want to be on video, if you don't, just tell me the joke. I would love to hear it. So I'm going to be having more stuff that is coming up. We have a few more that has been scheduled for us to be at, but I'm going to wait till it gets a little closer until time before we start announcing those that are down the road a little ways. But I'm excited about what's going to happen next with Original Geek and with If You Give a Dad a Podcast. It's been a real blessing to be a part of them. I feel that this show has grown a lot since being able to be with them in all these different places. So I want to say thank you to them for allowing me to be a part of the collective and be a part of them to bring you even more great content. Make sure that you check out the podcast that we have going on there as well, the Beyond the Panels. Those are always a blast to do. Talking with the guys in the collective to, talk about what's going on in Original Geek and, talk about the conventions that we go to or just things in general. It's just a bunch of friends that get to nerd out. So if you like what I do here and you want to hear more stuff like that, but in maybe a roundtable discussion setting, then go and check out Beyond the Panels. I have that tagged in the show notes as well. So I also have 2 other podcasts that I would like to tell you about, and I consider them to be my brother podcasts. They are based off of this show by name, and that is If You Give a Dad a YouTube channel and If You Give a Dad a Cosplay. It's run by 2 of my really good friends that I met through the Three Ranger Bros Studios, which is part of Zeo to Hero Podcast Network, and they're great guys. They run really cool shows for me, and they're really informative, so make sure that you go and follow them both as well. As you're listening to this, you're probably wondering where you can follow me on social media. I've been talking about social media on here and things like that, so you're probably like, Jared, where do we find you at? Well, I've made it pretty simple for you guys. In the show notes, you have my link tree. Once you click on my link tree at the top, it has the icons for all the different social media sites that you can find me on. Go and click on those, and it'll take you to my pages. Follow me on any of those. You can also look me up on Google. I am the first 10 to 15 results that you can find on there as well. So, yeah, go and hit me up. Also, if you want to send me an email to request a guest, or if you just want to talk to me about something, or if you want to send me a dad joke, send it to giveadadapodcast@gmail.com. You can also find that at the top of the link tree as well. If you could, do me a big favor. Rate and review this show. Tell me what you think of it. The more people that do that, the more likely I am to be recommended to other people. And I would love to see this show grow. That would really, really make me happy. I love the listeners that I have, and I would just love to see even more people come and enjoy this show as well. Also, make sure that you go and like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Hit the notification bell wherever it is that you're listening. That way you are notified when a new episode of this show drops. So, it is time to end this episode, and it is time for Billy's favorite part of the show, and that is Dad Joke of the Week.
Seriously?
How do you tell if an arrow is nervous? See if it quivers.
My name is Jim. I'm here to translate for Billy. His anger has overwhelmed him, and today you're going to find out what for.
Sometimes I have a stroke when I get too angry.
Did you hear a dad joke?
Yes.
You have to blink if it was that bad.
It's...
He blinked a lot, everyone. He blinked a lot. It was bad. It was bad. I am so sorry. We should not be here. We need to leave. Sir, I'm calling the cops. You endangered this man's life multiple times. I'm calling the cops.
Bye. See you later, Jared. See you next week.
All right. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Room grounded, but I got a podcast on. He calls us beautiful people, then tells us who we have on. The best part of my day, though we're blocked out in my pods. Tell my friends all about it so that they follow along. And the host is kinda nerdy, but guess what, I am as well. I don't feel so alone, and I began walking out of my shell. Heard a story, I needed connection I haven't felt. I'll be looking for the next one, till then farewell. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. Listen closely, download and tune in remotely. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. And listen closely, download and tune in remotely.
This podcast is part of the OIW Podcasting Network.